Hello friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off Ukraine War Update for the 22nd of December. It's almost Christmas. Of course, I think most of you know there is no Christmas ceasefire. I have mentioned this many times, but Zelensky has made it clear that the orcs must be defeated. All hail Zelensky! Now, of course, Captain Skysheild is saying the quiet part out loud. Remember that loan? That 2-year funding loan? Well, he's already said it won't sustain Ukraine's army. It won't sustain Ukraine. It's not even enough for 12 months, let alone 2 years. He thinks it's 50 million short. And, of course, he wants America to give him more missiles and more long-range missiles and more of everything else. Give me some money and I'll give you this for victory. This is a very important thing, and it is for counting the money. Zelensky. But, folks, friends and fans, you know, this war is a farce. But most people don't know. Liberalism has started most wars. Liberalism is anti-human. It's imperialist. What we are watching is the Roman Empire 2.0 without the good bits. We're watching the Roman Empire without the roads, but plenty of bread, toxic, and circus, twisted. It is Dracon on steroids. Those who know me know, I've said this often, all liberal democracies, including the original Athenian democracy, ends in fascism. We're watching liberal democracy unmasked. It always leads to the majority taking. The founders said this. They warned you about democracy. They warned you the majority will just vote for their selfish interests. That you must not let them. You cannot allow politicians to buy votes, whether it's Trump with his stimulus checks or Biden and his endless promises of free health care. It is all government intervention. All government intervention should be kicked in the nuts. All government programs. Minimum government. All contracts open to public scrutiny. Investigations. Nancy Pelosi, the most crooked politician since, who knows? There have just been so many. But of course, since a father in Baltimore, names changed to protect the guilty, right? But this is the problem. And it goes on and on. But Ukraine is a money laundering empire of criminals who have lied, and their lies protected by American media, free speech laws, and of course the ignorance of the masses, right? Once the lie spreads, the ignorant masses cling to the lie. It's a narrative that Ukraine was invaded, they are the oppressed. What's Ukraine, the poorest country in Europe, doing with an army of 800,000? They finally admitted it, that they built up an army of 800,000. Now, Putin has worn this down to around 670,000. Zelensky wants more money, more bodies. But of course, could you imagine going to one of these Facebook groups and saying, all right, everybody with a Ukrainian flag is now in the Ukrainian army. Good news, son, right? Should be good news to everybody who supports Ukraine. You could join the Ukrainian army. Hasta la vista. Of course, they don't want to go. Those who ask that is the establishment all over, is it not? Those who ask for the most sacrifice do not do the sacrificing. They are nothing more than assholes. They have to speak their mind every day. 2 minutes of hate. Remember, Oh, hey, Zelensky. Oh, Zelensky blew up a Russian jet. Oh, he's a genius. Oh, Zelensky blew up a Russian general. He's a genius. Zelensky this, Zelensky that. No, it's all fucking British intelligence. Zelensky is a fucking clown who couldn't work out 1 + 1. He is famously quoted as saying, "The Ukrainian business model is simple. You give me money, we never pay it back." Hey, when somebody tells you who they are, you start believing. Stop with the arrogance. Stop with the cope. Stop with the naive child. Okay? Most liberals are SpongeBob, okay? Brain missing. And their friends are even dumber. But as we look around the map, Russia has opened up multiple fronts, all to draw off resources from the front. They've made minor gains north of Kharkiv. They have made some gains back in Kharkiv. Now, this is known as the Kharkiv death trap, okay? The Russians lured the Ukrainians. They killed them. They move into Kharkiv. When the Ukrainians don't bite, they move into Kharkiv. And the Ukrainians come in playing diddly-do like F-Troop. Here we go. F-Troop racing in. And then eventually the Russians withdraw. And what happens? They get met with Russian artillery. And then the Ukrainians cope and seethe by going, "Oh, we drive out the orcs, everybody!" Yeah, it's called the Russian death trap. They did it in Kursk and Fort. Remember, they did it in Kursk. They did it in Stalingrad. Heck, the Americans keep forgetting they did this to the British. We saw this in the movie The Patriot, where, one would come out of the woods and go, yeah, and run off, and the British would chase them. Go get that traitor! And then the men would run after it like Muppets and get gunned down, running straight into firing lines. Of course, the Americans forgot all about that in Vietnam, didn't they? Running after Vietnamese like fucking Muppets into the jungle. Stop that man! Oh, who cares? Give him a Darwin Award. He's not coming back. But of course, liberals, they got what's their real world experience? I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a social worker. I'm a teacher. Yeah, you're the bottom of the fucking barrel. Okay? These people want 80k? They're not worth 10k. Their contribution to society is not worth a fucking penny. Okay? Most of them couldn't work a decent job. Most of them are so busy crawling up the union's ass going, "Oh, protect me from being fired for my incompetency." And of course, we do have movement on the map, but again, this is like molasses, okay? Now and again, however, as you can see, the molasses, by the time you realise that it's creeped up, it's now within 5 kilometres of Lyman. They've advanced further in the south of Lyman. They've only made small gains in Seversk, but they are porting around the roadblocks. Now they've made some gains here in the south, north of Chavez Yar. They've made a bit of a gain here. Now the gains in Konsk are very small, and on the outskirts of Konsk, south, they've made only little gains here, butting up against roads and rivers, and they've pocketed the Ukrainians here. The Ukrainians are given every opportunity to leave. Russia may be grinding the Ukrainians, but they're primarily driving them out. They're not primarily there to kill Ukraine. They're there to wound them, drive them out, pressure them. But of course, the majority of the world keeps their head in the sand. Sand, I mean up their ass. But you can see they've made some gains here. They are pushing they've pushed up to this road, trying to cut off. Now, it's hard to cut off Brodsky because there are multiple lines. But every road Ukraine loses becomes a death trap. Now, Myriad is under siege, and of course the Ukrainian death trap, known as the Pokrovsk railway station, is still operational, although Russia has made gains elsewhere, and they've overrun the Ukrainian base, driving the Ukrainians further back into Hydrony. In other areas, they've made only small gains, not really anything worth mentioning, mostly just pushing the Ukrainians out of little pockets. But they're coming up to Ivaninka here. They are pushing and overrun positions here. They're still pushing against the Ukrainians here. The Ukrainians poured so many men and machines into this counteroffensive, and the Russians are wearing it down. And of course, again, death trap. Every time Ukraine goes in the offensive, Russian lines buckle, form a V, and start crushing them. Their offensives are absorbed like an impact and then ground down like peppercorn. Now, of course, there are multiple attacks all across the front, but Russia overwhelmingly has moved forward. Now, every day, now they've moved into Hulopol and captured south of Hulopol, but not central Hulopol. And they've made some gains here south of Oryk. And again, the Kharkiv death trap continues to... Is it Kharkiv? Kherson death trap continues, luring in Ukrainians to their death. Meanwhile, Russia has hit ports again, and of course, just like everything else Ukrainian, all the Ukrainians do is claim that they're winning, that Russia only kills civilians, all the usual propaganda, all the usual talk of diplomacy being productive. But India has come out and says 202 Indian nationals believed to have been recruited by the Russian forces. Russian authorities reported 26 have been killed and 7 missing. Now, India has previously warned against Indians joining the Russian army, but there are Indians fighting in Ukraine too. Sweden, of course, is acting tough, which they can't do without Europe hiding behind Europe's skirt, and Europe can't do it without hiding behind Big Daddy Trump. Now, of course, all politics is theatre, but Trump is giving the Europeans enough rope. Let's hope he's using it to hang them all, and let God sort it out. Now, there is a probe into a murder of a Russian general, and we'll see over the next coming days retribution attacks by Russia in Ukraine. Now, if you believe these subversive tactics by Ukraine are heroic, you're a coward. That is not warfare. That's terrorism. And it's bringing out the worst in humanity. You think Ukraine's terrorism is justified? Then why isn't Russia's terrorism justified? Boy, that's right. You're all fucking hypocrites, aren't you? You choose sides. Why must we choose sides? Why must men choose sides against their fellow man? When it is ideologies that need to be defeated. Ideologies that suppress man. But of course, the liberals, think that they're liberators. They're not. They're Orwellian fascists. Always have been, always will be. Now, Russia is in talks with the US. We keep hearing the words productive. We want to see progress. But there has been at least some level of trust, because at least in the past, Trump has made progress. Now, I know liberals are pointing to Thailand, but that was violated by a Chinese gang acting with tacit approval of the Cambodian state and protection from local Cambodian warlords and military figures. Now Cambodia has had its ass handed to them. Thus, by proxy, China has suffered a huge setback, and they are deeply embarrassed because their missile systems failed to fire, their radar failed to detect, and the Thais overwhelmingly splattered them with F-16s. And of course, Zelensky has his hand out saying, "Give me those F-16s." But see, Thailand has had decades of training, integration, and they're trustworthy. Ukraine isn't trustworthy, and the equipment they've been given is always under maintenance, poorly handled maintenance, and of course they've lost hundreds of aircraft. Remember, it's a different war. Thailand was fighting Cambodia armed by China, whereas India where China was also handed their ass to them recently by India in Pakistan, with Western equipment, and again, Pakistan urged to grab some gas field or something water in Kashmir, under the guise of retaliation for a attack on attack by Indian security forces in Kashmir. Pakistani militants attacked a Indian holy site. India responded with an attack on a mosque. Now, this mosque actually was inside an army base, was not a random mosque. Okay, it's one of these things called the Red Mosque. These are military sites. They are. So we have a very unique set of situations around the world. You cannot judge right and wrong, but I mean the right. Why are you judging oppression narratives? Why are you siding against Russia when we should be? If we can stand up to Israel, why can't we stand up to Europe? Okay, why is it bad to stand up to Europe? The left says, "Oh, I'm just standing up to Israel." Then why can't we stand up to Europe and their wrongdoing? Oh, that's right, because liberals are the arbitrators of right or wrong. Oh, I forgot the memo. Oh, the holy memo of holy liberalism. They keep talking about the separation of church and state. Good, to get all the unions out of power. Get all the union members out of power. No priest of Marx in my workplace. If it has a doctrine, it's a religion. If it has an election, liberalism doesn't have elections. You don't vote on liberal ideology. It's indoctrinated into you. That's a religion. You can't change the orthodoxy. Only the establishment could do that. That's a religion. Basically, elections are choosing the Pope. You poop, and you don't realise it. You're being pooped on. Alright, so, in brief, a Russian radio telegram intercept picked up Ukrainian diplomats discussing their exit strategy from Ukraine. They've been quietly moving their families out. They've been moving money. Many of the regime's functionalities family. It's not just Zelensky. Okay, there are 12 ministers. They have a village now in Switzerland and Canada. They have a compound in Florida and Italy, although the one in Italy has been sold by Zelensky. But we don't know. I think it's Kolominsky. It's money laundering. Kolominsky gets money from foreign donors, and then he buys property. And they do this all the time. They buy and sell property to each other, often to evade taxes. They build up these tax debts and collapse the company and sell the property. And, Now, key takeaways of this. Ukrainian excluding the fact that this is Russian news, multiple searches will reveal that over the last year, many of Kiev functionaries have left Ukraine and their families and not have come back. Many Ukrainian functionaries who have retired to Spain. You could look up Ukrainian diplomat retirement Spain. It's not many, but there is definitely a pattern growing. And then according to this, 90% have been in communication with each other about not returning to Ukraine and about seeking retirement in Spain. But there are other compounds. Now, the reason why Spain, if you're a low-level functionary, you can't afford a villa in Switzerland or a compound in Florida. Now, Spain, Canada seems to be more like people connected to the Azov battalion, because every liberal government ends in fascism. Remember how they saluted the Ukrainian freedom fighter from 1944. Wait a minute, he fought the Russians in 1944? Duh! Yeah, how to say you're ignorant of history without saying you're ignorant of history. But EU has been called out by Viktor Orban yet again, saying that unwise politicians, weapon makers and bankers have an alliance. In other news, water is wet. This does not come as a surprise to any of my long-term followers. I have long called out the central banks of Europe, particularly Britain. The Rothschild banking establishment are the war profiteers behind the Ukraine war. They are the financiers, along with Nestle, of the World Economic Forum. Remember, World Economic Forum was put together by war criminals who had the Star of David on their chest and so got a free pass. Now, there is a second group in this, and again, it should come as water is wet, is that there are a lot of people who just love armed conflict. And they want to drag us into war. But they don't want to fight it. Remember, folks, every person with that Ukrainian flag in their bio, almost guaranteed that each and every one of them won't go to Ukraine. And remember, those who did, what did they? They all have TDS, and they didn't stay for long, did they? Every time Ukraine comes up, though, in a US court, it disappears. Crooks, Shank, a whole bunch of made-up names. This so-called furry community. This so-called... Yeah, they cover it. I'm not surprised if they're furries, but I'm saying the so-called furry community, it's code for Ukraine, okay? Ukraine is a cesspool of deviants and dilettantes and despicable characters. Now, of course, the European Commission is banking on reparations, everybody, to pay not just their collective budget, but to buy off the banks. Because after all, somebody has to pay these loans, aka the US taxpayer. Of course, they ultimately want to rob you, the US taxpayer. But Zelensky admits quite part out loud that he can't afford his army. And that he needs support, not just now, he's not just later, but forever. He wants reparations of the $210 billion. Then he wants $3 billion a year. He wants to help fund. He wants this $210 billion in assets transferred to him so he can fund the $3 billion in year interest to pay off his loans. What about Ukraine? Ukraine can't. $3 billion wouldn't cover Ukraine's debt. It's $400 billion. This is all just deception. Okay? These are all short-term grabs, okay? They dug a big hole, and now they're trying to fill it in, and it's collapsing around them, and they don't know what to do. Okay? Viktor Orban said the quite part out loud. Europe thinks that it could enact a strategic defeat on Russia, like they did in Afghanistan. Yeah, Russia. Do you know there's actually a working paper, right? If Russia had grounded its helicopters early, right, and re-engaged its local militias against the Taliban. Instead, they allowed the Taliban to kill off and roam the countryside. They over-relied on helicopters. Now, yeah, helicopter warfare introduced in early days in Korea. Korea was mostly evacuations, so a lot of helicopters didn't come under fire, but they did use helicopters to land snipers in difficult-to-reach positions. Now, they expanded on this. I think it was General Westmore who expanded it in Vietnam, but it was the Vietnamese who showed America how to do it with the airborne invasion and subsequent defeat of Pol Pot in Cambodia. That America was landing its helicopters too close. They were flying in too tight formations, and they failed to suppress air defenses, right? And that they often relied on flying too low and the noise of machine guns, But Vietnamese had become so fatalistic, the noise of machine guns didn't scare them, and knew that the chances of being hit were very low. And even if they did, they just didn't care. I'm hit. Oh well, too bad, so sad. But Moscow in Afghanistan over-relied on helicopters. This time they're not over-reliant on helicopters or air power or tank power. They are mostly reliant on rocket forces and artillery and drones and anti-drones. Okay, they're electronic warfare. They may be behind in propaganda, but that's only because they don't care what you and I think. Okay, they don't care what the liberal establishment thinks. They know. Okay, then Putin has openly declared war on Satanism. He's called out the liberal establishment for what it really is. Okay, but Moscow does believe they can have constructive talks and resolution. Okay? Russia has repeatedly said that it does not want Europe. It does not want all of Ukraine. Right? It does not want to waste manpower dominating a hostile empire. It wants a peace security agreement. Of course, security agreements are a trap. But this is what we have, right? Ukrainians privately acknowledge that they'll lose, right? They've almost lost the Donbass, but they believe that, but ultimately their final, this 800,000 army, right now it's whittled down to 600 and something thousand. The UK and Germany and Poland are racing to try and train more Ukrainians. They're falling short every month. They're supposed to have 50,000 a month rolling up to the front. They're barely scratching 30. And according to many, the recruitment is now scratching the bottom of the barrel. We're seeing the last days of the regime. Increasingly, though, Ukraine has a major security problem, and they know it. Could be 12 months ago. From now, they can no longer hide it. Okay? People are openly hostile to the Ukrainian government, and the attacks in Ukraine on Ukrainian armed forces, security forces, and government officials will only grow. Eventually it'll reach a point where Russia doesn't have to fight Ukraine, they only have to sit back, relax, and watch the shitstorm as Europe scrambles to try and send in a stabilization force and finds themselves under now attack from Ukraine, as the Russians did in Afghanistan. That's the situation. Okay, it's what Russia didn't understand in Afghanistan. They thought that the Taliban, aka socialists. Okay, the Taliban were socialists. Okay, they thought they could usher in communism. The socialist Taliban, however, wanted an Islamic socialist state and eventually rebelled against their allies, Russia. And thus, when Russia turned to the local militias, again they found communists, sympathizers low, but mostly Islamists who only wanted to kill their neighbouring tribe because allegedly they pissed in a river, or some other petty grievance, or simply because they took more water last winter they took too much water last winter, and now our crops are failing. The sky is too blue. You know, they have too much sunlight. You know, whatever it is. Okay, Afghans, moron mentality. Okay, low IQ war, but to never underestimate the low IQ to wage war. It's what they love it. They love it, I tell you. But most of the low IQ liberals don't want. They're parrots. They're never going to go to war. They want others to sacrifice because it gets rid of the right wingers. It gets rid of the undesirables. Now, of course, there are many who merely want war for the profits, and they know the right propaganda to stir the little shits known as liberals. But the EU and NATO have failed to protect their bloc, their place in the world. They seem to think that the liberal establishment is the new world order, and when we say jump, you say how high. But you forget democracy. You created all these different African states. You created all these Asian states. You created all these other states. You created, and of course, India, Russia, and China control the majority of states around the world. Your liberal world order is collapsing under you. Okay? Now, Trump's beef with Venezuela has got nothing to do with oil, right? This is the typical left-wing narrative. Find a lowest common denominator, seize on it, create some slogans, and then repeat said slogans without proof. Right? The burden of proof is on liberals. Do not respect liberals. Do not trust liberals. Do not care what they think. Just merely mock them as chickens, because they all bark about war, but they never fight it. But they always start it. You go all the way back to Rome, right? Slavers, imperialists. That is the left. You take out all that is good in mankind, and the left is what is. That's why they're called left, because they are what's left when you take out the good, right? We are on the right side of history. And thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. And as always, I'm going to list out the ways you can support me, even though you're probably tuned out by now. Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Thank you to each and every one of you supported the channel. All my links are in the link tree, description below, or in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you, see you in the next video, and bye for now.